Namanscha
Raghunatham Tam Saji
Avadhutam Parijanam
Avadhutam Parijana Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Krishna
Hindudina Bandhu Jagat
Sindhu Dinabandhu Krishna Lokita Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste
Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari
Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishwano Sute Devi Pranamami Hari
Priya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu
Prabhu
Nityananda Shri
Nityananda
Advaita
Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hare
Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. So is the voice okay now?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, good. All right, so let's get started with the chapter. So we will be discussing verse 13.5 today. Let me share my screen. Okay, I hope everyone is able to see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay, so far we have discussed that Arjuna had asked 6 questions to Krishna and Krishna has started answering the questions. And he is right now answering about Kshetra and Kshetragya, the body and the soul. Basically, the Kshetragya is a knower of the body. So there are 2 different Kshetragya that Krishna has talked about. One is the soul and one is the super soul. And he is continuing with that discussion. So until verse number 7, he is going to answer about Kshetra and Kshetragya. So 13.5, again, he is talking about Kshetragya. And 6 and 7, 13.6 and 7, he will talk about Kshetra, the body. So hopefully we should be able to discuss 5, 6 and 7 today. Let's see how much we are able to cover. So let's start with this verse. You can repeat after me. Rishibhir bahudha geetam.
Ishibhir-bahuda geetam.
Chandobhir-vividhai pritak.
Chandobhir-vividhai-pritak.
Brahma Sutra Padaishchaiva.
Brahma-sutra-padaishchaiva.
Hetu Madbhir-vinishchitah.
Madhir-vinishchitai.
Rishibhir-bahudha geetam.
Rishibhir-bahuda
Chandobhir-vividhai pritak.
Chandobhir-vividhai-pritak.
Brahma Sutra Padaishchaiva.
Brahma-sutra-padaishchaiva.
Hetu Madbhir-vinishchitai.
Hetu-madhir-vinishchitai.
Rishibhir-bahudha geetam.
Rishibhir-bahuda geetam.
Chandobhir-vividhai pritak.
Chandobhir-vividhai-pritak.
Brahma Sutra Padaishchaiva.
Brahma-sutra-padaishchaiva.
Hetu Madbhir-vinishchitai.
Hetu-madhir-vinishchitai.
Anyone else would like to say?
Rishibhir-bahuda geetam.
Rishibhir-bahuda geetam.
Chandobhir-vividhai pritak.
Chandobhir-vividhai-pritak.
Brahma Sutra Padaishchaiva.
Brahma-sutra-padaishchaiva.
Hetu Madhir Vinishchitai.
Hetu-madhir-vinishchitai.
Anyone else?
Rishibhir-bahuda geetam.
Rishibhir-bahuda geetam.
Chandobhir-vividhai-pritak.
Chandobhir-vividhai-pritak.
Brahma-sutra-padaishchaiva.
Brahma-sutra-padaishchaiva.
Hetu-madhir-vinishchitai.
Rishibhir-bahuda geetam.
Rishibhir-bahuda geetam.
Chandobhir-vividhai-pritak.
Chandobhir-vividhai-pritak.
Brahma-sutra-padaishchaiva.
Brahma-sutra-padaishchaiva.
Hetu-madhir-vinishchitai.
Hetu-madhir-vinishchitai.
Anyone else? Okay, let's start with the synonyms then. Rishibi, by the wise sages.
By the wise sages.
Bahudha,
Buddha,
in many ways.
Many ways.
Gitam,
Geetam.
described.
Described.
Chandobhi,
Chandri.
by Vedic hymns.
By Vedic hymns.
Vividhai,
Vividhe.
various.
Various.
Prithak,
Prithak.
variously.
Variously.
Brahma Sutra,
Brahmasutra.
of the Vedanta.
of the
Of the
Vedanta.
Vedanta.
Padai,
Padai,
by the aphorisms.
By the aphorism.
Cha,
Cha,
also.
Also.
Eva,
Eva.
certainly.
Certainly.
Hetu Madbhi, with cause and effect.
Cause and effect.
Vinishchitai,
Right.
certain.
Certain.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the super soul by referring to a scripture, the Vedanta, which is accepted as authority. First, he says, this is according to different sages. As far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage. And in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyasadeva's father, Parashar, is also a great sage. And he writes in his books of religiosity, Aham Tvam Cha Tathanye, we, you, I, and the various other living entities are all transcendental. Although in material bodies, now we are fallen into the ways of the three modes of material nature according to our different karma. As such, some are on higher levels and some are in lower nature. The higher and lower natures exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the super soul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature and is transcendental. Similarly, in the original Vedas, a distinction between the soul, the super soul, and the body is made, especially in the Katha Upanishad. There are many great sages who have explained this, and Parashar is considered principal among them. So I take a quick pause here just to explain a little bit what's happening over here. So actually, if you remember in the verse 3, Krishna had said, this is my opinion. Now when Krishna says this is my opinion, that is Krishna is absolute. So his opinion is actually absolute. That is the reality in that sense. But now what Krishna is saying is, he's saying that this has been explained previously by various sages. Great sages have explained this. This is what Krishna says here in this verse. And it is also mentioned in the Vedic writings. So he talks about the Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra. So Vedanta Sutra basically is, it is characterized by, very sharp logic. So what is Krishna doing here? Now Krishna knows that his opinion is the reality, but he is giving deference to the Vedic culture. So in the Vedic culture, the knowledge is passed by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So these are the three pillars. Actually, it's like a triangle like this. So Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So we all have read that many times. Prabhupada also says that. So if we have to consider something that is being taught, is this the reality or not? So we have to check. So what is the mechanism to check? So we have to check whether it is mentioned in the Shastras. Yes, it is mentioned. Whether it is talked about my Guru. Yes, it is talked about by my Guru. And then whether it is being talked about by previous sages also, the sadhus. So Krishna is giving deference to so he's talking about the sadhus and the Shastra. The previous sages are the sadhus and Shastra is the Vedanta Sutra. And he himself is the Guru. So Krishna has taken the position of Arjuna's Guru. And he is saying that what I'm telling you, Arjuna, is according to the previous sages and also according to the Shastra. So in that sense, it makes sense. So also what Prabhupada is telling here, Prabhupada is talking about, so Krishna had said two things, if you remember, in context to the Kshetragya. So first he said, no, the body is the Kshetra, idam shariram konteya. That is how the verse comes. This body, idam shariram konteya. So that is the Kshetra. And one who knows the body is the Kshetragya. So basically he hinted towards the soul. That is verse number 1 and 2 of the 13th chapter. And in the third verse, Krishna had said, I am also the knower in each of the bodies. So basically he's talking about two different knowers. One is the soul and one is the super soul. But what happens is, why Prabhupada is giving so much stress over here. So the Mayavadis, what they do is, when they translate the verse 13.3, now they translate this as, that Kshetragya that is mentioned in verse number 2 that Krishna had talked about, that Kshetragya is also present in all the bodies. The word cha that is used in that, I'm not going back to that verse, but that word cha that is being used in that in 13.3, they translate it as, no, this Kshetragya is present in all the bodies. So that one Brahman is present in all the bodies. So they say that the soul and the super soul are the same. There is no difference. That is just one soul they talk about. Soul and super soul, they combine it as one soul. But Prabhupada is making it very clear, and he is referring to Vyasdev and Parashar Muni, that all of them have talked about different entities. So if you see here he is talking about we, you, I, and the various other living entities are all transcendental. So what Prabhupada is trying to say is, no, basically there are different living entities, and there is also the super soul. And the soul and the super soul are not one, they are different. So that is why he's giving that importance here. And he's also quoting from different Upanishads. So let's see further what he's trying to say here. The word Chandobhi refers to the various Vedic literatures. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is a branch of the Yajurveda, describes nature, the living entity, and the supreme personality of Godhead. So nature is Prakriti, the living entity is Jiva, and the supreme personality of Godhead is Jagdish. So Jiva, Jagdish, and Prakriti are described very, they are described in detail in the Taittiriya Upanishad. We also discussed it when we were discussing about the verse 1 and 2. As stated before, Kshetra is the field of activities. And there are two kinds of Kshetragya, the individual living entity and the supreme living entity. As stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.5, Brahma Pucham Pratishtha. There is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya, dependence upon the food for existence. Before I go there, so Brahma Pucham Pratishtha. So Pucham means 5. Brahma is the Brahman, and Pratishtha means, it's manifested. So Brahma is manifested in 5 different ways, or at 5 different levels, basically, not ways. So how that is Srila Prabhupada is explaining now. There is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya, dependence upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then in Pranamaya, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or life forms. In a Jnanamaya, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there is Brahman realization called Vijnanamaya, in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next and supreme stage is Anandamaya, realization of the blissful nature. Thus, there are 5 stages of Brahman realization, which are called Brahma Pucham. Out of these, the first 3, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya, involve the fields of activities of the living entities. Transcendental to all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamaya. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying, Anandamayo Bhyasat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is by nature full of joy. So I'll quickly stop here. So we had actually talked about these 5. Now we had talked about the Panchakosha. If you remember, we had discussed this, and there was some confusion also, because we had there was in the quiz yesterday, there was a question about this. So there was some confusion. So let me actually clarify here what this Panchakosha is. So kosha in English, it is mentioned as sheath. Sheath means covering. So sheath is basically, the sword is inside a sheath. and when the sword is removed from the sheath and it is used. So sheath is like a covering. So these panchakosha is like a covering on the knowledge of the soul. So the first is so all these are progressive stages of realization, So the bottommost is Annamaya. So in Annamaya we had discussed. So before we go there, actually, let me also mention it to clarify it further. So these kosha are basically both objective and subjective. They are objective levels of Krishna's energy, and they are subject in a sense that they are it is by the subjective consciousness or the subjective level of realization that the soul has, they will be able to realize these different koshas. So let me explain it a little more. What do I mean by the subjective level of realization? So you remember we had taken an example of a dog, dog who is in India. He may not know that, so there is an Indian citizenship, but a dog has no understanding of what India is, what citizenship is, because he doesn't have that level of consciousness. He doesn't have that level of subjective level of consciousness to understand the concept of India on a in geography, and then the concept of Indian citizenship. But Indian citizenship is actually an objective reality. It is a tangible thing that we can say. There are documents with which we can verify whether a person is an Indian citizen or not. But to make it a little more clear, so for example, how it is how it is objective and subjective. Suppose, for example, there is a beautiful young woman, and that woman is being observed by three different living entities. The first is a young boy, a young man, and the second is a realized sage, and the third is an animal, say for example lion. So when a young man looks at that beautiful young woman, for him that same woman is basically it's an object of enjoyment. He looks at her in that way. For a great realized sage, that same woman is basically, he will see her as a as a object of illusion, and subsequently an object of misery, because if you get associated with that, later on you will get misery because of that. And third is lion. When the lion looks at the same woman, for the lion, the same woman is like, you look at her as a lunch box. This is my lunch for today. So that same object is there. That one woman is an object. She is an objective reality. There are three different subjects who are looking at that woman. But they have different level of subjective consciousness. So the boy has a different level of, the young man has a different level of consciousness, the realized sage has a different level of consciousness, and the lion has a different level of consciousness. So these five koshas are both objective and subjective. They are objective level of Krishna's energy, but the different living entities who are in different subjective consciousness will perceive it differently. So that is the understanding of these koshas. So now there are five different koshas: Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. So Annamaya is basically a living, and so generally the lower animals are in this Annamaya, or even the babies we had discussed the other day. So they are in the Annamaya kosha. For them, the whole of universe is unified by the purpose of eating. Everything for them is, they just want to put it in their mouth. So for example, if amoeba is a living entity, but all it knows is, it knows how to eat. It may not be even aware of its own existence, because the soul is so covered, the consciousness of the soul is so covered, that it may not even realize that it actually exists. All it does is just everything that is there, it just wants to eat it. Similarly, a baby we had discussed, whatever comes in the hand of a baby, the baby just picks it up and then put it in the mouth. I have, when my children were babies, they used to eat their toe. I used to be so surprised, why would someone eat their own toe? But they would eat anything, whatever comes in their hand, they will want to eat it. So that is the Annamaya Kosh. They just care about eating. So we have eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. So within that, they only care about eating. The Pranamaya Kosh is basically, it goes a little further. The consciousness is a little more evolved. and then the living entity in that particular kosha, he cares about, eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. Basically the existence, the struggle for existence. Whatever is good for my existence, I accept it. Whatever is not good for my existence, I will not accept it. So that same eating will be there, but the person may have a little distinction. Okay, if I eat this, no, this is not good for me, but I have to maintain my prana, so I'll not eat this, I'll eat this. So there will be some distinction over there. So like, that is the pranamaya. Now in the prana, from there the living entity evolves, the consciousness evolves, that is jnanamaya. So here the person or the living entity is able to actually distinguish itself from thinking, feeling, and willing. It is able to understand that, okay, I have certain feelings, I am different from my feelings, I am a my existence is it is different from my feeling, willing. Because early in the pranamaya, what happens is the person associates himself so strongly with his feeling, not a person but a living entity. Generally animals and all those kind of people are in that pranamaya kosha. It will identify itself so strongly with the feelings that as soon as the feeling comes, he will the living entity will act on it. So if, for example, the feeling of hunger comes, immediately it will start hunting for food, and wherever the opportunity comes to get some food, it will pounce on it and will just grab it and eat it. But at the jnanamaya level, the person sees that himself different from these feelings. At the level of mind, he can understand that, okay, I am feeling angry now, so I have to control it. These kind of feelings are not good for me. Even if we have to exist in this material world, there are certain feelings which are good for us, certain feelings which are not good for us. So we try to stay away from those feelings which are not good for our existence, and we try to be near to those kind of feeling, will, and thinking which are good for us. How do I progress more in the life? So basically jnanamaya is the next level of evolved consciousness. And then beyond that, then there is the Vijnanamaya. Vijnanamaya is basically the person starts understanding, no, I am not this body actually. So earlier, the person was seeing that, okay, I am different from this, my mind. Now I'm sorry, I'm different from these, my feelings, etc. And here in Vijnanamaya, he starts realizing that I am also different from my mind. I'm not this body actually. I'm the spirit soul. But at the Vijnanamaya level, the knowledge, the uh, clear understanding about God may not be there. The person may understand that there is a supreme person, but that relationship, what is my relationship with the supreme person and what is the nature of that supreme person, those things may not be very clear. But when a person comes to Anandamaya, he understands, okay, there is a supreme person, and he is actually really Anandamaya. Supreme person is always blissful, and if I relate more with the supreme person, I will also be more blissful. So, for example, Lord Ram, Ramati and Ramayati. So Ram means one who enjoys and one who gives enjoyment. Ramati, Ramayati, Ram. So that is how it is mentioned about Lord Ram. Meaning of
Hare
the
Krishna, Prabhu.
yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, actually now the disturbance is coming more frequently. I think better to have your earphone only.
Okay, I'm sorry. I should get a new laptop.
Yeah, I mean, I
Sure.
Is everyone able to hear me?
yes, Prabhu.
Is
Yes,
this
yeah.
okay? All right. So these are the 5 different koshas that we were discussing. So, and Prabhupada also explains these koshas here, but we have to understand that these 5 koshas are actually objective level of Krishna's energy, and also they are subjective in a sense that different people who are at different subjective level of consciousness will perceive things differently according to their whatever level they have come at. Okay. So moving on, to enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, and Annamaya. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and different from him is the Anandamaya. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy in dovetailing himself with the Anandamaya, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as the supreme knower of the field. the living entity as the subordinate knower and the nature of the field of activities. One has to search for this truth in the Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. It is mentioned here that the codes of the Brahma Sutra are very nicely arranged according to cause and effect. Some of the sutras or aphorisms are na vyat asrutehe 2.3.2, natma shrutehe 2.3.18 and paratu tachrutehe 2.3.40. The first aphorism indicates the field of activities, the second indicates the living entity, and the third indicates the Supreme Lord, the Samam Bonum, among all the manifestations of various entities. So here actually Prabhupada is actually talking about how the living entity progresses from Jnanam, from Annamaya to Pranamaya to Pranamaya to Jnanamaya to Jnanamaya to Vijnanamaya, and from Vijnanamaya to Anandamaya. And also, if you see where Prabhupada has mentioned about the Taittiriya Upanishad in the chapter 2, where it says Brahma Pucham Pratishtha. So actually the whole objective is to how to know Brahman. You know, the Brahman is the spiritual reality. So that is the purpose of the Upanishads, to take you from the material level of consciousness to the spiritual level of consciousness. So we had discussed actually that there are two ways of acquiring jnana. So the jnana is basically, the purpose of jnana is to take the person from the material level of consciousness to the spiritual level of consciousness. So the jnana is acquired in two ways. So we had discussed it the other day. So asti and samasthi are the two ways in which the jnana is acquired. So asti is basically from the individual to universal, you know. So we basically, what happens, so Prabhupada also says that, you know, if you have to know the nature of the ocean, you know, what is the composition of the water of ocean, you just take one drop of the water of ocean and then you study it. So whatever is the nature of that one drop of water is the nature of the ocean will also be the same. Similarly, he says that actually we are just a drop of Krishna. So we are just parts and particles of Krishna. So if we have to understand what is the nature of Krishna, we can study our own nature. So we can understand, okay, so how it is we first understand, okay, so we first study the body, then we go inside the body, okay, we have the mind and intelligence, and then we go further beyond mind intelligence and we see the soul. Okay, I have the soul. So that is the way of understanding from a asti perspective. So samasti is basically, we see, okay, there are so many, you know, we have this nature, we have this prakriti is there are different living entities, you know, and then everything in this universe is changing. But we study it further and we understand that, okay, you know, this, beyond the changing reality of this universe, there is something which is steady. So the foundation of this changing universe is basically in Brahman, which is the spiritual reality. So we from in that way we try to understand you know, the Brahman, and then we understand, okay, we have this the soul which is spiritual. So in the asti method, we basically, when we reach the soul, from there we go inside the spiritual reality. In the samasti way, we first, and we, you know, by understanding the nature, prakriti, different living entities, and then going towards Brahman, we then understand, okay, there are two entities, you know, there is the soul and then there is this Brahman. Now what is the similarities between the two? What is the relationship between the soul and the spirit, the Brahman? So that is how the knowledge is then reconciled. So I'll just read the translation one more time. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments about what we have discussed so far.
Prabhuji, I could not understand the subjective level of kosha. So can you please elaborate on that? I understand that, let's say for Annamay kosha, I mean, in the child we see the small baby that they want to put everything in their mouth, and animal also just think about their eating most of the time. So they are in Annamay kosha. So can you just explain how we are saying it's subjective?
Subjective is the realization of the living entity who is in that particular kosha. So we had taken the example of a beautiful woman, right? So for example, so the three different living entities are looking at the same woman. So there is a realized sage and there is a young man and there is a lion. So lion is at the pranamaya level. So he is looking at that woman as a lunchbox, he can't think beyond that. That is his level of subjective level of consciousness. That is the most he can think. He cannot think anything beyond that. Then further to that, there is this person, the young man, who is looking at this woman as a source of enjoyment, because he may be at the, he is beyond the pranamaya, but he is at the anandamaya. He is at the level of mind. He can, he has some his aesthetic sense is developed, so he can see things at the level of mind. And then we have the sage, who is looking at the same woman, but his consciousness is more evolved. So he is able to see that lady as as a source of illusion and a source of a misery future, if the person, if he decides to interact or whatever, then it could bring him misery. So he is able to see that. So his consciousness is more evolved. He is at the vijnanamaya level. So he can see that if I, this woman is actually the source of illusion for me. So that way, so the subjective level is the subjective level of consciousness of the person who may be. So these three living entities are in three different koshas, and their subjective level of consciousness is more, is at different levels. So that is the subjective level that we are talking here.
Then what is the objective level, Ganapati Govind?
Objective is basically...
Prabhuji, sorry.
Yeah.
So I have a follow-up question. Sorry. So when you say that young boy who has a lusty desire, so you are saying that he is in the Anandamaya Kosha, but we
No, he's not
understand
in
that.
Anandamaya. He's at the. I'm
but
saying
you mentioned Anand, so I.
No, I'm saying I
Yes, yes.
said Jnanamaya, at the level of mind, not at the level of. So the aesthetic sense are more developed. So he's not just at the pranamaya level, he is at the anandamaya level. I'm sorry, at the Jnanamaya level.
Jnanamaya level.
Yeah, that's what you said. So I just had a question. Okay.
I'm sorry.
By mistake, I think you said
Okay.
that. So
Yes. Sorry,
yeah,
Mataji.
sure. No problem.
It was a slip
Go
of tongue. So the
Yeah, no
object
problem.
is, so Gitamala Mataji's question is, what is the objective level? So objective is, there is an object, there is a tangible object. So that woman is actually the object. So these 5 levels, they are objective levels. We understand, that these are 5 different levels, and these are actually tangible. A person who has that knowledge, who has that vision, he can see that there are different living entities in this universe, and they fit into one of these 5 categories. So these 5 categories are objective. They are not subjective. So what do I mean by objective and subjective? Again, I'll give an example. So for example, so there is that joke, many jokes were there when Srila Prabhupada was spreading the movement in USA. So, on the TV, people used to make fun of the Hare Krishnas a lot. So one of the jokes was, that I was watching in the YouTube, there is a person looks at the twins, and then, babies, twin babies, and the person says, these twin looks as identical as 2 Hare Krishna monks. So that was the joke. But for them, they only look at the externals. For them, the 2 Hare Krishna monks, they look exactly the same. They can't make any difference out of the 2. But at the same time, when a realized person looks at it, when a person who has knowledge, when he looks at these 2 people, they could be the same Hare Krishna people, but he will be able to understand, okay, one has, he is more, this person's understanding is more evolved, he is a better devotee, and this person is like a neophyte. He will be able to make out that distinction. For example, if I am there and Rasraj Prabhu are there, we both are, we both are object. We may both look the same way. Both of us will wear kurta, both of us will wear kanthi, both of us will put tilak, both of us will have shaven heads. So if you look at our characteristics, they are very similar. So when the people look at, from an external perspective, a person who has no understanding about, what this Hare Krishna movement is and what these devotees are, they may think that, okay, all of these are, the same people, they dress same, they look same, they talk the same thing, Hare Krishna, what is the difference? But when a realized person, when a person who has that understanding, say for example, Pyari Prabhu is he will look at both of us, he will be able to understand, okay, this Rasraj Prabhu is, he is a better devotee, he's such a nice person, he wants to, serve so nicely in so many different ways he's serving. And when he looks at me, he will be able to easily understand that this person is trying to fool everybody. He's just blabbers on this, every Monday 7 to 8 he blabbers, but he does nothing else. So he will be able to understand. So so there is an objective reality. So objective reality is that, okay, I am a person, I'm an object. Rasraj Prabhu is also is a object. There is an objective level of reality, but then you have to have the subjective level of consciousness to make differences.
Are you saying that objective is more at the qualitative level then? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's tangible, Mataji. That's what I'm trying to explain. Something that is more tangible, So these 5 koshas are tangible levels. So we may not be able to make out the difference between the living entities who are at different levels. So for example, I may be at the level of, say, Jnanamay, and Rasraj Prabhu may be at the level of Anandamay. So when you look at it, you may not be able to figure it out that, I am at the Jnanamay level and Rasraj Prabhu is at the Anandamay level. But when Pyari Prabhu looks at both of us, he will be able to figure it out because he has that vision to see things in their proper perspective. So he will be able to understand quickly that I am at the Jnanamay level and he is at the Anandamay level. So that is the difference. So these 5 koshas are objective levels of Krishna's energy, but so that is the objectivity I'm talking about.
I think we need to ask Pyare Prabhu what
I
he
know
thinks
it's a little
about us.
confusing.
Pyare
Okay,
Prabhu,
When I look at both of you, I see one is tall and one is short.
And earlier when you said that when somebody looks at the woman, he thinks her as a source of misery, but also someone could see her as a spirit soul and, and not see her external at all, right?
Yeah.
And that would be...
That is the subjective level of consciousness I was explaining. So the object is same, the woman, but 3 people who have 3 different levels of consciousness, subjective level of consciousness, they look at the same object differently. So everybody has a different vision to look at things. So that is what I was trying to say. So the objective levels are, these 5 are objective levels of reality. These 5 objective categories exist as it is mentioned in the scriptures. Prabhupada is also talking about these 5 levels of consciousness: Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. So that is the objectivity. These are 5 objective levels. But
what about the last 2? How do they look at the woman?
You mean at the sage, so Vijnanamaya. No, Prabhu, I just give an example. I just made it up that the realized sage looks at the woman as a source of misery and source of illusion. But it could be that so from at Vijnanamaya, the person understands that I am not the body, I am the soul. The knowledge of the Supreme Lord may not be completely there. The knowledge of the Supreme Lord will come at the Anandamaya level. So at the Anandamaya level, the person may be able to understand, okay, this is also a spirit soul. This also, if this spirit soul also associates with the Supreme Lord, he or she will also be able to come at the Anandamaya stage. Now again, all these, what we are discussing right now, they are at hardcore Jnana section of Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada also quoting from different scripture, from different Upanishads. So these Upanishads are not very easy to understand. We have to really get inside we have to learn these things from someone who understands this. So if you really want to understand this to its fullest, we have to actually pick up Srimad Bhagavatam 3rd canto, where this is explained very nicely. Prabhupada also written elaborate purports to explain things, how things work in the Jnana world. So Pyari Prabhu, I may not be able to completely explain it. I can only explain to the extent where I have understood it.
I can't completely explain it either.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so I'll move on to the next verse. We still have time. So We just recite it once. You can repeat after me, but we won't be able to, others may not be reciting it. And we will not do the synonyms here. Mahabhutani ahankaro,
Mahabhutani Ankaro.
buddhir avyaktam evacha,
Buddhivadaktam Evacha.
indriyani dashaikam cha,
Indriyani Dashekam Cha.
panchachendriya gocharaha,
Panchachendriya Gocharaha.
ichha dvesha sukham dukkham,
Icha Desha Sukham Dukham.
sanghataschetana dhritihi,
Sanghatah Chetana Dhritihi.
etak kshetram samasena,
Etashetram Samashena.
savikaram udharitam.
Avikaram Udaritaham.
The five great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, and the mind, the five sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions, all these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Purport. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns, and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this word can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the five great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the three modes of nature. Then there are five senses for acquiring knowledge, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. The five working senses, voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then above the senses, there is the mind, which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are five objects of the senses, smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Now the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the five great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms represented by consciousness and convictions are the manifestations of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The five great elements are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception or tamasa buddhi, intelligence in ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of the three modes of material nature. The unmanifested modes of material nature are called pradhana. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail along with their interactions should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad Gita, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then it begins to decay, and at the last stage it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material thing. However, the Kshetragya, the knower of the field, its proprietor, is different. So here, so Krishna is explaining now. So the Kshetragya discussion is over. Now he is talking about the Kshetra. So Kshetra, so there are 24 elements that are being talked about here. So first, the five great elements are the earth, air, water, fire, and ether. And then he talks about the false ego, intelligence, which is the part of the subtle body, and the unmanifest. So unmanifest, Srila Prabhupada explains, that is the pradhan. Then the 10 senses and the mind. So total there are 11 senses. So 10 senses are 5 knowledge acquiring senses and 5 working senses. So those are 10 plus 1 mind. Then the 5 sense objects. So the 5 sense objects are also described. So in total it comes to 24. And then we have objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Now it is interesting here. Now Krishna says, "Etat kshetram samasena savikaram udharitam." No, sanghatais chetana dhritihi. Etat kshetram samasena savikaram udharitam. So another translation for this is, and if you see in the other translations that are made, So the way it is translated is, it is said that, the consciousness is a vikar of matter, sa vikaram udharitam. So vikar means it's a transformation of matter. Now, what exactly is consciousness? Is someone would be willing to answer what is consciousness? Is it a transformation of matter?
No.
Yeah. So it is not a transformation of matter actually. Consciousness cannot be produced by any material substances, So actually, how it is so the how the body is made is also actually described in the first verse. So there are these 24 elements that are mentioned, and then after that is talked about ichha, dvesha, sukham, dukkham. So ichha and dvesha, so desire and dvesha means things that we repel, we don't like those things, that is dvesha. So how it is no, there are, depending on what kind of body we have acquired, we may have different kinds of ichha and different kinds of dvesha. So actually, in one of the purports, I don't remember which purport, Srila Prabhupada says that when the soul is in the body of a hog, it is attracted to stool. But when the same soul is in the body of a human being, the soul is repelled by the stool. It's the same object, which is stool, and the same soul is there. But according to the kind of body the soul has acquired, it will either desire stool or it will repel stool. So how it is no, this body, every body is different. Every body has different kinds of coverings which are there. Coverings in the sense that the coverings, depending on which body the soul has entered into, there are different levels of covering on the consciousness of the soul. So there is also a word here. So actually, the Chetana that is being talked about here, this Chetana sometimes is also referred as Chitta. So Chitta and Chit. So there are two different things. So this also came in the 6th chapter. If you remember, there is this verse that is Yatra Uparmate Chittam Niruddham Yoga Sevaya. So basically, what was mentioned there was, by the practice of yoga, the Yatra Uparmate Chittam. Chittam is the consciousness of the soul that is reflected out from the body. So there is an original consciousness of the soul, Chitta. So chit is different from chitta. So chitta is the same consciousness that is there, that when it is reflected through the body, that is called as chitta. So the soul is there inside the body, and the consciousness is radiated outside from the through the channel of mind, and then from the body. So from the different senses, the consciousness is radiated outside. So when it is radiated out through the body, it gets transformed. There is some kind of vikar that comes because of the different kinds of bodies which are there. So some bodies cover the original consciousness much more than the other bodies. So in the human body, the consciousness is the most evolved. When the soul gets the human body, that's why it is said that we should not waste this human birth. It is very rare. It's very rarely that the soul actually acquires this human body. So we should not waste this chance. So the reason is, the covering of the soul is very, very less. The soul can perceive things a lot more better than when it is in the animal body. So the transformations are less. The original transformation, the original consciousness of the soul is transformed less when it is in the human body. Whereas the same soul, when it is in the animal body, it is much more transformed. The vikar is much more there, the transformation is much more there. So this ichha, dvesha and sukham, dukkham. So ichha and dvesha will come from the different kinds of bodies. It will be different for different bodies, and based on what kind of ichha and dvesha, sukha and dukkha will come. So, and then sangatas chetana dhriti. So based on these ichha, dvesha, sukha and dukkha, we will have dhriti. We will have convictions. Now, what is conviction? This is good, this is bad. This is worse, this is worst. So those kind of convictions, we all have some kind of convictions. Okay, I like this, I don't like this. So how does that come? It comes based on my ichha and dvesha, and it also comes based on what gives me sukha and what gives me dukkha. So based on that, I have some kind of dhriti, some kind of convictions. So that is what is being described here. So basically this is the description of the body, of the kshetra. So there are the 24 elements. So Prabhupada says that when you study these 24 elements, you will be able to understand the body, you know. And then Prabhupada also says one who desires to know the 24 elements in detail along with their interactions should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad Gita, summary only is given. So actually, as I said, we can actually read Srimad Bhagavatam. In the third canto, it is given in much more detail where the Sankhya philosophy is mentioned. So in the Sankhya, these 24 elements are described much more elaborately. And the same the Sankhya philosophy that is described in the third canto, for people who are interested, it sounds very interesting. But people who are not interested, for them it is very confusing. They won't be able to understand what's happening there. It's so technical that some people just completely gets put off by that hardcore philosophy that is mentioned in the third canto, in the um, Sankhya section of the Bhagavatam. So we just have 5 more minutes left. Are there any questions or comments about what we have discussed so far?
What is that avyaktam?
Yeah, actually avyaktam is pradhana. So Prabhupada also mentions, so what happens is when the whole material world is destroyed, so there are 3 different kinds of pralayas that are talked about in the scriptures. So some people say that at the end of every Kali Yuga there is a pralay. Actually, that is not true. How it is the first pralay happens when the timeline of a particular Manu, his timeline is over. So actually, we had discussed it once that there are in one day of Brahma 1,000 times this cycle of Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and Kali Yuga is repeated. So in one day of Brahma, there are 14 Manus, and within one Manu's lifetime, 72 times this cycle repeats. So the first pralay happens. So actually, at the end of Kali Yuga, there is a pralay in a sense that Kalki comes and he kills all the people who are, almost everybody becomes materialistic and atheistic. So Lord Kalki comes and he basically kills them. But there is no physical destruction of the material world as such. So the first level of pralay happens when the Manu's lifetime is over, and the second level of pralay happens when Lord Brahma's one day gets over. When he goes to sleep, at that time there is a partial destruction that happens, and the third and the complete annihilation of the material world happens when Brahma dies. So Brahma actually lives for 100 years, and then after his death, when Brahma is his lifetime is over, at that time a complete annihilation is there. So what happens is the matter, it basically it becomes like a non-homogeneous substance, which is called as pradhana. So it is like a lump of matter. So right now when we look at matter, we can see, okay, there are human beings, there are animals, there are trees, there are plants, there are birds, and then there are these non-living things. You can clearly distinguish. But when the pralay happens, when the matter exists in the form of pradhana, you won't be able to distinguish. It is just like a lump of matter. So that
We
is called
ourselves
pradhana.
won't be there that time.
I'm sorry?
We ourselves won't
will
be
not
there.
be there. Exactly.
So
yeah, we won't be there.
I mean, the whole concept of the 5 great elements would be there in a different form.
Yeah, exactly.
But the senses, the mind, all other things are because of our existence.
Actually, so these
If we
senses, the
have
mind.
no conviction, if we have no consciousness, then the 5 senses, the life symptoms, the convictions, all are gone.
Yeah, so actually the senses, the mind and intelligence, they are all material elements that is also mentioned here, right? So actually all of that is there, but in an unmanifest form. It is not manifest. When it is in the form of pradhana, the intelligence, all those things are there, because they are material elements, but they are in unmanifest state. So if you read the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned how the different elements come from the one element will it will come from another element, from another element will come. So it is a little technical, and it's very difficult to even understand how one element is coming from another element.
And also, Ganapati Prabhu, when you say we ourselves will not be there, we will be there in an unmanifested form, right?
Unmanifested form, right?
Right.
But
So
we won't be able to
we
observe
can
what's
be
happening.
manifest
I
again.
understand, but at that time we will not understand any of this, or maybe we'll
Right.
understand everything, but
Yeah. So basically, we have to understand that pradhan is that the matter when it exists in an unmanifest form and as a lump of matter where there is no distinction, you cannot distinguish one object from another. This in the sense that I'm saying we will not be there to distinguish, but that is how the matter exists in the form of pradhan. And then when again, the creation starts and another Brahma comes after that. Again, what happens is when the matter is agitated by the glance of Mahavishnu. That is how it is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So then again, when the matter is agitated, when the pradhan is agitated, again the creation starts. So then one from one element another elements come, like that. Creation starts one more time. And then different elements are manifested, and then the whole creation, it basically takes place and then takes shape, not just place, takes shape. So and then there you will be able to basically things exist distinctly from each other. Yeah, that is how
But
it is.
But isn't the spirit soul itself
I-
absorbed into the body of Mahavishnu?
Yeah,
And
the
then,
spirit soul is all the souls enter the body of Mahavishnu, but
yeah, and then when
the
he breathes
pradhan does not
again,
enter. Right.
yeah, Pradhan does not enter. But when he breathes again, then they will be manifest again.
Correct. Yeah, that is
Yeah.
true, Mataji.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments about what we have discussed today?
why is ahankar and buddhi mentioned along with Mahabhutani and Avyaktam?
Okay, so Mahabhutani is the five great elements, earth, air, water, fire. So these
Right,
are all
right.
constituents of the material, the material energy. Ahankar is false ego. So basically, false ego is a constituent of the set. So we have the gross body, as we can see. The gross body is made up of the five working senses and five knowledge acquiring senses. So that is the gross body. But then beyond the gross body, there is also a subtle body. So the subtle body also is material, and it is made of mind, intelligence, and false ego, ahankar, as we say.
Mhm.
So this ahankar is basically that ahankar makes us think that we are the body. We identify ourselves with the body because of this ahankar, because of this false ego. So that is how the soul thinks that I am this body. We identify ourselves as this body. Agar if I have some wound in my hand, no, it's hurting me, actually it is not hurting me, I am the soul. It is just hurting the body, but because I am identifying myself with the body, I get so distressed. This wound is hurting me so bad. So that is ahankar. So it is also a material element, and that is why it is mentioned over here. So Mahabhutani, and then ahankar, and then buddhi is intelligence, which is also material, and then avyaktam is the unmanifest, which is the Brahman. So
But just like Ichha, Dvesh, Sukham, and Dukkham,
yeah.
aren't these also because of the
No, these are the
material?
transformations that happen. No, these are not material elements, but these are the transformations that happen because of the body, because of these 24 elements. So Ichha, Dvesha, Sukham, Dukkham is basically these are our feelings. Ichha and Dvesha and Sukha and Dukkha. This is how we feel, right? So Sanghatas Chetana Dhritihi. So basically Dhriti is the convictions. Because of this level of consciousness, we acquire different convictions, and those convictions are based on Ichha, Dvesha, Sukha and Dukkha.
Does intelligence depend on ahankar, or ahankar depends on intelligence?
Actually, see how it is so these three. Okay, someone is drawing someone on my screen, something on the screen. I thought my screen
Oh,
cracked.
sorry,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Something
Okay, so
I touched something on my phone, and I
okay.
just wiped something on my phone, and it just drew lines. I am extremely sorry. I don't know
No
how it
problem.
happened.
No, I just thought my screen cracked suddenly. I thought, what happened?
No. There
Okay.
is this pen icon on my phone, and while I
Okay.
was wiping the phone, it got
Okay.
tapped first. So I don't know how to. Let me try to switch it off.
No problem.
No.
Prabhu, impetus you to take new laptop soon. If you thought that.
Okay. All right. So basically, neither the intelligence depends on the what is that, the ahankar, and neither the ahankar depends on intelligence. These are two distinct elements, so, and both are required for us to function in the material world. It's not that we can function without the false ego, and it's not that we can function without the intelligence.
So like animals, they have buddhi for sure.
Yeah.
Do they also have ahankar?
Yes, that is how they identify themselves with their material body.
Oh, so the
So that ahankar is the medium through
understanding
which
that I am different from others is ahankar.
actually ahankar is basically I am this body. That is
The
the
understanding of me as a
everything that
body.
everything that we see in relationship to this body. Everything that we see in relation to this body. I am American, I am Indian, I am old man, I am young man. I am Marathi, I am Gujarati, I am Sikh. All those things. I am Hindu, I am Muslim. Everything that we see in relationship with the body is actually because of ahankar, because of false ego. So that is ahankar actually. So there is a false ego and there is a true ego. The true ego is that I am not this body, I am the soul. That is a true ego. But the false ego is when we start identifying ourselves with the body and then we see everything in relationship with the body. I see my wife and my children as more dear to me than other living entities. Because I am seeing them in the context of my body. So actually Arjuna got bewildered in the start of the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna gets bewildered because he is seeing things in relationship with his material body. And that is why Krishna says that you actually have to first understand that you are not this body, Arjuna, you are the soul. And these people are also not their bodies. These are their souls. So these people are souls, not the bodies. So that is how the Bhagavad Gita starts. So actually ahankar is the medium, through which we identify ourselves with our body.
So Ganapati, when we go back to Godhead, we have to dissolve both of our material body and our subtle body, and understand our constitutional position in the pure ego. But what happens to the mind and intelligence then? I mean,
so there is something called as antahakaran. Antahakaran is actually the soul's internal. Karan is basically sense. Karan means senses. Antahakaran means the actually spiritual sense. So we do have our spiritual mind, spiritual intelligence, and spiritual ego is the true ego, which is that
pure
I am the
ego,
body, pure
that
ego.
that I'm my constitutional position,
Right.
So does that manifest sometime in this?
Prabhuji, where is that verse describing this? Because we had a discussion with Pyare Prabhu, I think last year.
You have a good memory. Last year.
Pyare Prabhu said, give me that place where it is described. Because someone was saying that we have our spiritual body, our spiritual intelligence, something like that. And Pyare Prabhu stopped there and said, give me the reference.
Okay, Antahakaran is mentioned definitely. So that Antahakaran is basically the spiritual.
I heard about Antahakaran in Hindi,
So Antahakaran is mentioned in the Bhagavatam also, Prabhuji, and that Antahakaran Acharyas explain that this Antahakaran is basically our spiritual senses, and these spiritual senses are, is basically they will be manifest when we are in the spiritual world. So how it is through the body we are able to see, through the body we are able to touch, through the body we are able to smell. But we are able to do that. We, in a sense, the soul is able to do that because the soul has that inherent quality to see, to hear, to smell, to touch. Unless that the soul has that capacity, body is just a medium. Until the soul has that capacity, it won't be able to see, touch, smell, anything like that. So the body is just like a covering on the top of the soul. So that antahakaran, the spiritual senses, are always there with the soul. And then what happens is, because the body is covered with the soul is covered with the body, the soul is actually perceiving things through the body. So those antahakaran are always there with the soul. They are never lost.
Yeah.
Because of the presence of those antah current through the material senses, that the external currents, the soul is able to perceive. So
When does the self consciousness or ahamkar actually come into existence? Is it as soon as a child is born, or is it when it
actually,
starts growing at
yeah, so it is
conceived?
mentioned in the scriptures that the subtle body is always with the soul. You know, even when I will die, when my material body will perish, you know, this gross body, when it will
Mhm.
perish, still the subtle body will remain with the soul. And you know, the soul is actually the soul is attached to the subtle body. And so when it is mentioned that the yamdutas come and they take away the soul, so actually the soul is not material that the yamdutas can come and drag the soul away like that. What the yamdutas do is they drag the subtle body, and because the soul is attached to the subtle body, it also gets dragged along with it. So that is how it is. So that subtle body always remain with the soul till the time the soul is in the material world. When the soul leaves the material world, at that time that subtle body is dissolved, and then the mind, intelligence, and false ego falls apart, and then the soul has the spiritual mind, spiritual intelligence, and then it also has the true ego, which is the understanding that I am the pure soul, you know, the pure yeah, that is how it is.
No, my question was slightly different.
So this, as I
Right
said,
now, when we start thinking about this, we realize that intelligence is different from my understanding of myself, that is ahankar. At what point in jiva's entire life does ahankar manifest or buddhi manifest?
no, so that's why I'm trying to explain. So actually, intelligence, mind, and false ego, together these three constitute the subtle body. So the subtle body always remain with the soul. You know, since the time the soul enters the material world till the time it leaves the material world, the subtle body will always remain. So when we say that, okay, this person remembers their past life, you know, you have heard that, right? There are
Right, right.
many, you know, scientifically proven cases of reincarnation. So how is that person able to remember their past life? Because the the physical body has fallen. You know, how is it that this person is able to remember his past life? So that is because of the subtle body. The subtle body, which is mind and the intelligence and the ego, the false ego, that always remain with the soul. And when the soul gets a new body, the same subtle body, you know, comes along with the soul, you know. So the impressions are there on the mind, and when the mind is able to recollect, okay, in my past life I actually had done these things, I was a different person in my past life. Even in the Srimad Bhagavatam it is mentioned there are cases of reincarnation. The Bharat Maharaj story which is there, where he first reincarnates as a deer, and then he reincarnates as another human being, you know, as Jada Bharat.
Mhm.
So how he's able to remember is because of his subtle body, because of mind, intelligence, and false ego. The subtle body is the same subtle body carries over from one physical body to another physical body to another physical body. That is how it is. So until the time the soul is in the material world, the same subtle body, which is consisting of mind, intelligence, and false ego, that same subtle body will remain with the soul.
So why is mind not mentioned in this particular verse?
Mind is mentioned.
Is it Chetana? Is that the mind?
1 second, I'll tell you. The great elements, false ego, intelligence, and manifest. Okay, there is the five great elements: false ego, intelligence, and unmanifested, the 10 senses, and the mind. So let me share my screen. Okay, we have exceeded the time
I
a
know.
lot,
Sorry.
but if you see
This will be
here,
my last question.
yeah, and the mind here it is mentioned. The 10 senses and the mind. So actually, mind is considered to be the
Bhutani
11th sense.
ahankaro buddhir avyaktam evacha indriyani dashekam cha pancachendriya gochara ichha dvesha sukham dukkham sanghatas chetana dhriti etat kshetram samasena savikaram udaratam buddhir avyaktam evacha.
Actually,
Is
if you see,
avyaktam the mind?
no, actually, the avyaktam is the unmanifest here, but eva certainly. So here, indriyani, the sense, and dasha ekam cha. So dasha, so there are 10 senses, and ekam. So the cha word, actually, my understanding is that when we say dasha ekam 11, that includes the mind, that with the, it is represented with the word cha. So later in the same Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is going to say that actually in the, I think it will come in the 14th or the 15th, no, not 15th, 14th or the 16th chapter. So Krishna will say that actually all the different senses which are there, they are centered around the mind. So the mind is considered the strongest sense. This is, it is like an aggregate of all the senses. So in that sense, it is considered to be the 11th sense. So dasha ekam means 11. So he has talked about the 10 senses, and it is understood by the word cha here that the 11th sense
Okay.
that he is talking about is the mind.
Right,
Prabhuji, it's 15.9, Prabhu.
Yeah, 15.9. Thank you, Mataji. So
So it's
somewhere,
the the living
right.
entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He
Yeah,
thus enjoy a particular set of sense objects.
correct. Thank you, Mataji, for that reference. So all these
but
senses are
I'll read that.
centered around the mind. So in that sense, mind is also a sense, and it is the strongest sense. So actually, if you see in the 11th chapter where Krishna was saying that out of in the 10th chapter where Krishna was saying that how he is the best among a particular set of things. So he says among the senses, I'm mind. So he actually considers mind as the sense. And mind, and it is the strongest sense because it is the
Right,
mind
the
on which the
mind
impressions.
governs everything else.
Exactly. So yeah. All right. So I think we can
Okay.
stop here
Yeah.
and we
Okay.
can
Thank you
discuss
so
more
much.
tomorrow. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
I'd like to say that I'm not sure what Alanath said that I said.
Okay. You don't remember that, Prabhuji, you said?
I don't even know what it was about.
Yeah. Pyare Prabhu said that someone said the soul has a soul.
Soul has a soul. Is that what
That's something like that. Yes.
Yeah, well, the soul is the soul.
Or it was, I think, on the mind. I think it should be live. I think you can go back and hear. Someone said something like spiritual intelligence or something like that. So then you ask that what is the reference?
We have a mind right now, and we also have a spiritual mind. It's not going to be the same mind.
Yeah.
We have this body, and we're going to have a different body. We don't have the same body that just becomes spiritual. I hope not. We have a spiritual body. So we have a spiritual mind, we have spiritual intelligence, but it's different from our material mind and material body and material intelligence. So I certainly don't remember what it was I
What
said.
does the soul identify itself as?
It's the body.
So when we move from a body to next body,
Soul comes with us.
I know the soul will go to the next body, but
it's a subtle body that carries us into
understanding
the
of
next one.
does the soul have an understanding of something like ahankar, that I am the soul?
Yeah, so when it is mentioned that when we basically we realize ourselves, the self-realization, when we say that self-realization is to realize the self is the soul. So we realize our true self, that is not this body, that is the spiritual entity. The soul basically, at times people think that it is some abstract entity which we don't understand. Actually, it's not like that. People think that, okay, I have a soul, but actually it's the other way. It's not that I have a
Soul
soul,
has
it is
you as
that
the body.
it's not that I have a soul. Actually, the correct way of saying is I have this body. So that is the correct understanding. So soul is not some abstract entity that which we cannot understand. So basically soul is our
Consciousness, our understanding of things.
no, it is the essence of our existence. It is the essence. No, without soul, there is no existence actually. So it is our
True.
essence of our existence. So, but it is intangible because as long as we are in this body, so I was talking about chit and chitta. So chit is the original consciousness, and chitta is the transformation of the consciousness that happens because of the body. So all we are aware about right now is the chitta. The chit, we are not aware about chit, the original consciousness of the soul. So when we are successful on the path of self-realization, then we will be able to become aware about chit, the original consciousness of the soul, so that, but it is a process. It is not that tomorrow I'll wake up suddenly and then I'll be enlightened and then I'll be able to start identifying myself with the soul and not with the body. It's not like that. So that whole process is there, and Krishna is talking about that process here in the Bhagavad Gita, how to do that. So he's talking about different ways to do that. So one way he has talked about in the 6th chapter, as I was saying, yatra uparamate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya. Through the process of yoga, through the practice of yoga, the person is able to actually, when he meditates, then the chitta becomes fixed. It is, the chitta is moving, and my consciousness goes from this object to that object to that object. That is how it happens. The mind takes my consciousness from this place to that place to that place. But by the process of yoga, by the practice of yoga, my consciousness can become fixed, and that is what is described in the 6th chapter, yatra uparamate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya, by the process, the practice of yoga. Now this practice of yoga could be ashtanga yoga, it could be bhakti yoga, but we have to be fixed in that process. So that is
Anything that detaches you from inputs from different senses, basically.
Yeah. All
In
right.
a way, can it be said that a person in coma is actually at that stage?
Coma.
No, he still has a subtle body,
He has a subtle body. He's alive. He just cannot, or maybe he does have the senses. He can't react to them.
Yeah, we will not know unless we have reached that stage.
I don't plan to get into coma stage to understand that.
Yeah.
But they say that even in a person in a coma hears, because the soul hears, so even if our other
Right.
external senses
I
are
think he
not
can
hearing.
sense, but
No,
cannot react.
like Ganapati Govind said, the soul has hearing too, so you can hear, you can still hear.
Yeah, actually, and this is also proven, scientifically proven, when there are out of body experiences which are there. So there is one very strong out of body experience which happened here in America, where a lady, when she was being operated upon, she actually was able to see herself from the top, where she was able to see the doctors are operating on the body. And then she was able to hear what they are talking. And when she came back to her senses, she actually related word to word that what the doctors were talking, what were they doing on the body. So I can share that with you if you want. But the soul has the capacity to hear outside of the body. So this lady, when she was out of the body, and this happened in America, and it's not a Hindu person who was, so people generally say that no, these Hindus make up stories. This is the verified case where the doctors were so surprised that the kind of procedure they were doing, there was no way for this lady to actually have any kind of consciousness at all. But the fact that she was able to see everything what is happening in the room, and she actually narrated it, and she was able to hear exactly what the doctors were talking about, what they were saying to each other, that was very striking for them, very, very astonishing for them. So the soul does have the capacity to hear, and it can hear actually. So it's not just because through the material body that we can hear.
Yeah, hear and see and everything. Yeah.
Prabhuji, what is the reference?
Yeah, I can share that, Prabhuji. So it is also mentioned
This
in
is
the
good. Very good example you gave, that they saw out of body experience, but we need to find a reference.
Actually, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu has written a book about it. I'm missing the name of the book. In that he has, and then I actually went on YouTube and actually saw the interview of that person.
There are so many cases like that, Ganapati Govind. There is even a book written by a Christian lady called Embraced by the Light, Betty Eady, and she actually says she had a complete out-of-body experience, and she saw everything below, and she did not want to come back into her body at all. She felt her body felt like a wet suit, And she
Right.
definitely didn't want to come back into the body, even though she had like 3 or 4 children. She still did not want to come back. So there are so many experiences like that.
Maybe that's why she didn't want to come back.
Oh no, I mean, she loved her children, but she felt, the light, or God, as she writes in the book, wanted her to come back, that her life was not over. And so she gets back into the body, and she says coming back into the body felt like getting back into a wet suit, she says. And then, I mean, it's not that she didn't love her children, it's just that when you're actually out of your body, you recognize you're the soul. So you are, obviously I don't know how it feels, but she must have at that moment felt she was at the soul level, and who she is. You actually recognize, I'm the spirit soul, I'm not that body that I just left.
Yeah. Actually, what I was referring to is that is actually called Operation Standstill, where they bring the material body to almost as if it is dead. They stop the heartbeat, and then that is how they operate. It's very, very complicated. I can share the reference. It is there in Chaitanya Charan Prabhu's book. I'm missing the name of the book. I have the book with me. I can actually give the names also as mentioned in that book. And then you can also go to YouTube and search on it. And then you can actually see the interviews of those doctors and everyone. So it's a verified case of out of body experience in a sense. Yeah. All right. Should we stop here now?
Yes, we should.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
There
Hare
is,
Krishna.
there is
One
another
second.
verse comparing 342, comparing senses and mind, if anyone wants to see. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Vancha kalpatarubhyascha
Vancha.
kripa sindhubhya eva cha
Vasangadhyeva cha
patitanam
patitanam
pavanebhyo
pavanebhyo
vaishnavebhyo namo
vaishnavebhyo
namaha.
namo namaha.